right.
Free for all.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know how did you guys want to start this?
Well, we decided to talk about the symbolism of the moon, I thought, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
George MacDonald stories. I don't know, Luke, have you read Lilith or just Fantasties?
I've just read Fantasties.
Okay. So we
and then,
limited. I mean, I think the symbolism. I did some digging. I'm just like a, Nancy Drew.
That's good.
That's called Bloodhound. So I was doing some digging on some of it, and it's super interesting actually. Yeah. So, but we can limit it to Fantasties.
well, don't limit it for my sake. If there's stuff that you guys want to go for, shoot for it, because I shoot for the moon. There.
We need more of those. Keep those coming.
But yeah, I don't know if I will have if any input that I do have, it'll probably just be whatever my intuition is bringing me in the moment, because I feel like I've got a thin grasp of Fantasties, and I'm not even sure if I remember all the
moon stuff. Yeah,
moon stuff in there. I think
there's so much in Fantasties.
Yeah.
Is there? I don't remember, because we're reading it again right now, and we're in the very beginnings of it. And then I was listening to Lilith, trying to listen to it in preparation of this, and then I didn't even go through much of Fantasties again. But yeah,
there is some moon symbolism in Fantasties, but it's not as heavy as Lilith.
Okay.
And it's interesting because I read a quote or like a commentary from George MacDonald's son Greville, and about Lilith and Fantasties. So he wrote Fantasties kind of in the very beginning of his writing career, and then he ended with Lilith. And there are a lot of what's the word? There's a lot of mirroring happening between the two stories. So you should really read Lilith, Luke. Like you would, yeah. If you love Fantasties, like Lilith will be.
So I like
really
how
good.
Luke Thompson described. I think the first time I ever heard anybody talk about Lilith, it was him, and all he said was, "It's a trip," and I was like, "Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. It's a trip for sure. It's go on a ride."
Oh,
it's so good though.
It is.
I hear there's another one. Is the Golden Key? It sounds like maybe that overlaps as well with some of the same themes.
Mm-hmm.
Donald too.
Yeah.
No, I'm open to suggestions. So.
Yeah, all his stuff is great. It's really good. And Shari's familiar. I think more familiar than I am with the double story or the wise woman or what? I can't remember what it's called. Yeah, and that one's really good as well. Yeah, he's got a lot of short stories that are really good. That do have overlapping themes or whole similar symbolism, but
yeah.
Yeah,
I was talking about the wise woman in one of our Grail Country conversations, and Michael Martin was there, and he said, "Just call her Sophia, okay?" I was like, "Okay, I'll just call her that." That's what she is.
So, what did some of your research when you were digging? What did you, Nancy Drew?
Well, before I lay bare the facts.
Okay.
Not the facts, other people's opinions, really. I was just let's just fly by the seat of our pants. Like,
okay,
I think that's fun, and then we can compare notes after, with some of the stuff that I came up with. And it's not a lot really, but there's a lot of food for thought in what I did find. So yeah, so like, what comes to your mind, Jason, when you're thinking about George's use of the moon?
Yeah, if we're looking at his use of the moon, in particular, I'm not quite sure, because he always does that with symbolism. Like he'll have like with the same thing with the shadow, where you kind of want to pin it down and say it's this, and then as soon as you try to do that, it eludes you, and it's like, so he kind of
Mhm.
seems like the moon does that a little bit. But when I made like some notes, and I was going to try to get a read back through them, but I didn't really get a chance. But I put that, um, yeah, I'm not sure that it's symbolized, like the moon actually symbolizes anything in particular for him, but he rather uses the moon as a symbol for many different things. And I think he just kind of, uh, yeah, I'm not really sure. It's just the lesser light to rule the night sort of thing. So it seems to cover a broad spectrum, but then I don't know if that's too broad, but that's my understanding of it. So it includes like, and I don't know if this is just related to George MacDonald, but my thoughts about the moon would be that it includes intuition, inner thought, subconscious thought. Like solar thought is conscious, like it's very clear. You have a lot, can see better outlines, details, and it's like more inner thought, stuff like that. Instinct as well, like when you have like werewolves or full moon and stuff like that. And then, I don't know. There's just a lot that goes um, in with it, and I'm not really sure about George MacDonald in particular, because I don't know that I ever really studied the moon. I just like had a short phase where I was on a fast, and it was just like, I guess you would call it synchronicity. I don't know what you call it, but it was popping up all over, and yeah, it's just it's more like communion, I guess, with the moon. I would lay out every night and look at it and just be like, then I
Yeah.
started calling it her, and I'm like, okay, now my family's gonna think I'm weird. Like, oh, there she is. But yeah, but
Well, that's interesting because technically the moon is feminine, symbolically speaking. The sun is masculine, and for the same reasons that you mentioned, like because with the sun, everything is clearly defined, right? You can see it all. Whereas with the moon, it's veiled, something like that,
yeah,
which makes it a feminine symbol. Even for like astrologers and
yeah,
all that, right? So she is the moon. The moon is she.
yeah. Yeah, you just kind of get that sense. It's kind of weird because it seems like you just kind of have that intuition, and it's like
Mhm.
the moon just tells you that she's feminine if you pay attention to her. It's really strange. And I was even thinking about narratively, I wrote a note, and I was just thinking about if I was writing my own story and I had a character go into a cave or into like under the water or something. I was like, it wouldn't be absurd to me that they might find a moon there for some reason. But if they found a sun, like they would never find a sun in a cave, or the cave would just disappear or something. Like it just would, I don't know why, it just doesn't work in my head. And so it's just kind of that
Yeah.
that light in the darkness, I guess, the subconscious or something, the dream world. But in Lilith particular, I'm not sure about Fantasies as well, but it seems like, because I was writing a note, let's see, I wrote a note here because it comes up when he goes to this one house. I'm not sure if he kind of relates the moon also, because it's related to kind of this dream world, because it's at night when you're sleeping. And so then I don't know if George MacDonald kind of runs a thread through death as well. And because it's rest and sleep and all those things kind of are woven together. It's hard for me to tell. I don't want to make that claim. Like I said, I put my finger on it and then it just gets away. But
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts, you guys, on his use of the moon?
Go, Luke.
Well, talking about that contrast kind of between the masculine and feminine in particular, talking about the moon, and I don't think this is any sort of insight on what George may be, how George might be using the moon, but I was immediately thinking of like I don't know, the reflection, and how the moon is this body that reflects the sun. So there's a bit of the sun in the moon or what have you. So like and then I was thinking of immediately like Adam, Eve, the rib, Eve being made of Adam, and sort of like that crossover. And if there was any sort of like, I don't know, something that could be said there in regards to even in the very way that like Adam is not even conscious of himself until Eve sort of like illuminates, like reflects back to him who he is, I guess, in a way. Like,
Yeah, with the bone of my bones, flesh of my
yeah,
flesh. Yeah, that's really good. Actually, I never even thought of that. That's really good.
yeah, I'm not sure because I think like that very idea that like the I think this might even be a Jordan Peterson thing. I don't know. But that whole like I remember somebody saying at some point in the last like 3 years of my life, like women make men conscious, and so it's like without, and I guess I've in my own marriage, and I'm not saying the sun and the moon are wedded to each other, but in a way they might be, but there's this very like reciprocal sort of
Yeah.
uh relationship there.
Yes, actually.
So
Yeah, pretty good intuition. Yeah. Well, to be honest, I thought for a whole week and I came up with nothing.
Really? All right. Wow.
It's like the moon,
Yeah.
nothing. And then I
Cool.
one more time. The moon. I was like, why? What's going on here? Why can't I think of anything? I thought of nothing. I did know that because George calls her in Lilith her, right?
Mm.
And then there's also this connection to water. The moon is connected to water. And I thought about it in relationship to the meditations on the tarot that we're going through, right? Because water is reflective, right? You look into the water and you see your reflection.
wow, yeah.
And it's also what I'm trying to think now, the high priestess, on the high priestess card, there's water, right? Because it's indicative of the reflection of gnosis, looking into the water and having that reciprocal feedback, I guess, into yourself. But as far as George's stories, I was just coming up with the blank, because I was kind of like Jason, where it's like, it just kept eluding me, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'd get caught up in the moment of what was actually happening.
Yeah.
And then I would be like, okay, but the moon.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. It seems like he just throws her in there whenever he collectively has this. It seems to me that he understands her very well, but he'll just throw her in there for like seduction or something in a way. Like all of a sudden you see this. To me, so, go ahead.
Well, there's a whole part in Lilith where he's accompanied by the moon, right?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
I should see if I can find a Lilith quote to read.
Yeah.
I was also
What, Luke?
did you two stumble, because of course my generic like Google search is George MacDonald moon.
That's about the
And
same
he
as
has
mine.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
because I'm not coming up with it, but like he has a poem called The Wind and the Moon.
Yes.
I have
Did
never
you
read
guys
that.
read that this week?
Yeah, I actually listened to it.
I've never heard that.
Oh my goodness.
His poetry sucks, though. It's so bad.
Is it bad? Okay.
I think it is.
I think I liked the concept because it was like the moon still like kind of just like didn't really shrug at the wind.
Wait,
But
can you read
then
it?
that kind of
Is it long? Can you read it or?
Yeah, I could read it. I might stumble over it. I mean, we could listen to like a Scottish man read it and it would sound, I guess I am Scottish, so here we go. The Wind and the Moon by George MacDonald. Said the wind to the moon, I will blow you out. You stare in the air like a ghost in a chair, always looking at what I am about. I hate to be watched. I'll blow you out. The wind blew hard and out went the moon. So deep on a heap of clouds to sleep, down lay the wind, a slumbering soon, muttering low, I've done for that moon. He turned to his bed. She was there again, on high, in the sky, with her one ghost eye. The moon shone white and alive and plain. Said the wind, I will blow you out. And the wind blew hard and the moon grew dim. With my sledge and my wedge, I have knocked off her edge. If only I blew right fierce and grim, the creatures will soon be dimmer than dim. He blew and he blew and he thinned to a thread. One puff, more's enough to blow her to snuff. One, I'm sorry.
Oh, I like this.
One
reading.
good, one good puff more where the last was bred, and glimmer, glimmer, glum will go the thread. He blew a great blast, and the thread was gone. In the air, nowhere was the moonbeam bare. Far off and harmless the shy star shone. Sure and certain the moon was gone. The wind he took to his revels once more. On down in town like a merry mad clown, he leaped and hollowed with whistle and roar. What's that? The glimmering thread once more. He threw a rage and danced and blew, but in vain was the pain of his bursting brain. For still the broader the moon scrape grew, and the broader he swelled his big cheeks and blew. Slowly she grew, till she filled the night and shone on her throne in the sky alone, a matchless, wonderful, silvery light, radiant and lovely, the queen of the night. Said the wind, what a marvel of power I am. With my breath, good faith, I blew her to death. First blew her away right out of the sky, then blew her in. What strength have I? But the moon, she knew nothing about the affair, for high in the sky, with her one white eye, motionless, miles above the air, she had never heard the great wind blare.
Does anybody find that helpful?
Yeah.
Does anybody get the critique that his poetry sucks?
It's like this, I swear it's satire. I think he is like satirically using rhyme scheme to like, I don't even know, like.
Yeah, it does feel a little over
Bursting
the top.
brain. Bursting brain.
Yeah, dude, like, oh man. Here's what it is though. The rule, I think it shows that the moon still rules over like here the wind is this powerful force, but the moon has this authority that is not bestowed to any sort of like, I don't know, a force that we might know here on Earth. It is otherworldly in that sense, the authority that it has, and similar to the light. It's beyond our it has certainly influence over our material world, but not necessarily, and certainly influence over maybe much more than we can comprehend. But yeah, it's also beyond.
Yeah.
To infinity and beyond.
Well, I found another moon poem that he wrote. Can you believe it? Because
No way.
I listened to that one, and every time I would put in the moon, and George, that the wind and the moon came up. But this one surprised me. So, and it's really short. She comes, again she comes, the bright-eyed moon. Under a ragged cloud I found her out, clasping her own dark orb, like hope in doubt. That ragged cloud hath waited her since noon, and he hath found, and he will hide her soon. Come, all ye little winds that sit without, and blow the shining leaves her edge about, and hold her fast, ye have a pleasant tune. She will forget us in her walks at night among the other worlds that are so fair. She will forget to look on our despair. She will forget to be so young and bright. Nay, gentle moon, thou hast the keys of light. I saw them hanging by thy girdle there. So that was interesting, especially in light of what else I snipped out today.
Say more about that.
Yeah, I want to hear some more sniffing.
Thou hast the keys of light. So let me see, I've got a quote saved because I can, it's impossible for me to remember all these things, but I'm going to just read this. This was from a paper that I read on the shadow in Fantastes. But in this part of the paper, he talks about the moon. And I actually thought, because the moon, the sun, all the planets and the elements, they all have, they come from alchemy, right? So I thought, the first thing I thought of was Boehme, Jacob Boehme. And I thought, and I know that, or I intuited that MacDonald would have a relationship to Boehme's works, which are alchemic in nature, right? And he did. So it turns out he was well acquainted with Jacob Boehme. So if you'll just allow me, it's a little bit of a read, but I'll read it. It's really interesting. I think we could, it'll be really fun to talk about. MacDonald's romantic roots led him to focus more on moon symbolism. Boehme gives symbolic precedence to the sun, the similitude of Christ. While Boehme was likely an influence, MacDonald must have encountered other alchemical texts as well. In light of its connection to the black sun, the shadow can be identified with what is known to alchemists as the negredo, the black color representing death, which a substance takes on during transmutation of base matter into the philosopher's stone. In the alchemical tradition, the philosopher's stone can be seen as a substance equivalent to the quintessence that transcends the material elements and thereby has the power to manipulate them, or as a human being that has completed a process of spiritual regeneration and has become unified in spirit with the divine, as in the Gnostic and Hermetic traditions. This process goes through many different stages that vary according to the alchemist or alchemical tradition in question, but a process consisting of at least three main stages of putrefaction, coagulation, and sublimation is usually followed. The negredo is part of the process of putrefaction or dissolution. This dissolution, says Trismeson, who I don't know who that is nothing but a killing of the moist with the dry. So this is now getting into alchemy, but just hang in there. A putrefaction and constantly turns the matter black. So it's a killing of the moist with the dry. The moist in this context can be the spirit in a substance or in humans. The dry can be seen as elemental matter separated from spirit. The negredo then is the result of the separation of spirit from matter, usually seen as mutually present in phenomena. In MacDonald's symbolic conception, a human under the spell of the negredo is a disenchanted human, a material human, reminiscent of the scientific naturalism that reigned in Victorian Britain at the time of writing Fantastes. Indeed, we soon see that the shadow has transformed a nodos into a rational materialist from the enchanted young man able to see the spirit in things when he first entered fairyland, symbolized by his ability to see fairies enchanting the flowers. The, quote, most dreadful, unquote, part of this development is that soon he begins to welcome the shadow's disenchanting presence. In a land like this, with so many illusions everywhere, I need his aid to disenchant the things around me. This is a quote from Fantastes. He does away with all appearances and shows me things in their true color and form. And if I live in a waste instead of a paradise, I will live knowing where I live. Sounds so nihilistic, doesn't it? So he's talking about the shadow, but he's going to get to the moon. Okay, I included everything because it just leads into it. MacDonald uses the sun to symbolize this disenchanted way of knowing. Though the shadow is not dependent on a nodo's position in relation to a particular light source, it shows up blacker in the sunlight, the shadow, I guess, while it is not visible by moonlight. In the full light of day, a nodos experiences fairyland as the mechanistic workaday world of industrial Britain. Enchantment or awareness of the spiritual essential in nature is much more difficult. In other forms of light not connected to the shadow, such as dawn, twilight, and sunlight filtered through the trees, fairyland is revealed as it is beneath the moon. A panentheist world in which both external and internal meanings are seen in the symbolic repository of nature. Moonlight is a symbol of knowledge reflected between the self and nature through imagination. Isn't this crazy?
Wow.
A guiding light beneath which the enchanted nature of matter is more visible. So I just want to say one thing, because I talked to Jason about this. I think it was in the conversation with you, Luke, that I mentioned that when I thought about the shadow in Fantasies, I realized that a shadow is only cast when the sun hits a material object, right?
Mhm.
And so the shadow was a direct result of the sun and materialism. And that's what cast the shadow. And so I was very pleased with the beginning of this to find out that I wasn't that far off, really. I mean, I didn't have all the other insights, but okay, so I'll keep going here with the moon. Moonlight is thus directly connected with a fairy or dream, or as a way of knowing. Night is the fairy's day and the moon their sun, quote. This symbolic structure matches with the role played by the sun and the moon in medieval alchemy. In alchemical texts, the sun is often related to fire and sulfur, while the moon is connected to water and mercury. Mercury, seen as a literal metal, but even more importantly as a primal element representative of water and earth, is the principle of fusibility, while sulfur, seen as representative of air and fire, is the principle of combustibility. Mercury gives permanence to metals, while sulfur corrupts them. The sun of Phantastes is symbolically applied to a nodos in order to begin the alchemical process through a combustible process of putrefaction, the function of sulfur, while both water and the moon elevate him through coagulation, a function of Mercury. The connection of the sun to the industrialized Britain of MacDonald's day represents a critique that is clearly in line with the views of romantics like Coleridge, Shelley, and Wordsworth, for all of whom he professed deep admiration. MacDonald went beyond the romantics with his panentheistic cosmology, however, as his thought remained primarily theological. His ideas were ultimately a product of the minister without pulpit, rather than the romantic writer of fairy tales. To truly understand the shadow as a symbol of the disenchantment resulting from materialism, we should look past the romantics and focus on MacDonald's ultimate goal for humans. It is important for humans to view phenomena as living symbols so that they will be aware of their essential unity with nature and thus begin to glimpse the face of God. The materialist path is therefore the path away from unity, and for MacDonald, quote, oneness with God is the sole truth of humanity. Life parted from its causative life would be no life. It would at best be but a barrack of corruption, an outpost of annihilation, unquote. MacDonald has often been accused of being vague, but he is very clear on this point. A disenchanted state, such as that symbolized by a notice's shadow, is death. So there's a ton of stuff in there.
Yeah.
Wasn't that great?
Yeah.
Find this again?
I can link this to you guys.
Okay.
I'll link this paper. It's 16 pages, but it was really fascinating. It was mostly about the shadow.
Okay.
But it had this nice little tidbit about the moon in it. So where do we want to start?
So was he saying that the shadow, I'm not super familiar with alchemy. So was he saying that the shadow kind of comes up to disenchant things, and then
Yeah.
the quicksilver of the moon causes it to be re-enchanted from that dark space or something? Or
Well, he says, yeah, like the fairy's son is the moon, right? Like the enchanted world lives under the moon.
Mhm. Yeah.
And the moon. And so like if we want to take it back to what you said in the beginning, Jason, about the moon being feminine, representing intuition and instinct, and what else did you say? Insight.
Yeah, let me see. I wrote down some things. It's to me, it's like creativity, instinct, subconscious thought. Because I mean, even if you just look at stuff, if you go out on a full moon, the shadows are a bit eerie and vague, and there's this weird comfort that goes along with it too. Though it's a very, very feminine feel. But yeah, it is. Yeah, that makes sense to me that he would say that it's the fairies' day, because the moonlight, I don't know, kind of gives life to that imaginative world. I feel like it calls you. I actually wrote something down. I said it. What was it? Sunlight. Like the way the moonlight works. I feel like, I don't know why I wrote it. It almost like makes you look more intently or something. It causes you to, because things aren't as clear, so you kind of have to wonder a little bit or something. And engage
Yeah.
with that inner intuition and stuff like that. But yeah. Oh, dreams and daydreams I had written down too, is kind of the creative thought, exploratory thought, maybe things like that. Mystery, and I put kind of mystery and kind of a bit of a seductive quality, in that it kind of a question, because you mentioned like the veiling and unveiling of the moon in a way too. Like all those ideas, I think, are kind of
Well,
intertwined.
the moon is like a veil. Like it's silvery, right? It's white. It's not full blasting sunlight, that exposes all the contours and every detail.
Yeah.
And he does talk about periphery too in Fantastes, right? Like when Anoto starts to see shapes, right, in the story, he sees human shapes, but when he looks straight at them, they're just a rock and a tree and a bush. I really love that, because what he's saying there, that it is, if you actually see the thing, that the enchanted world in your periphery, right? And then when you look straight at it, which is what the sun is doing, right? It's that full-on look, then it loses its magic, and it just becomes the thing itself, this material thing,
Yeah.
And there's a poem that I saved a long while ago. It's in Fantastes, and it's this one here. It's: man doth usurp all space, stares thee in rock, bush, river in the face. Never thine eyes behold a tree. 'Tis no sea thou seest in the sea. 'Tis but a disguised humanity. To avoid thy fellow, vain thy plan. All that interests a man is man. And then that's at the beginning of one of the chapters in Fantastes. And then he actually uses later on in that chapter the line rock, bush, river, right? He steals that little triad. And it's when Anoto starts seeing these human shapes, which is indicative to me of when he starts to become enchanted. Mm-hmm. Because I think further back in the story, he sees one at one point, and it's nothing. But then he starts seeing these human shapes everywhere. And every time he looks at them, they're just, a rock, a bush, or whatever, right? So, yeah.
I've got a thought.
Yeah.
and it goes back to the subconscious slash pre-conscious. I don't know if there's a good distinction between subconscious and pre-conscious.
Yeah.
But I've heard both of those terms used before, and I think there's something to be said. Like as soon as it becomes conscious, it loses its, like, almost in the same way that the periphery operates. Um, once it becomes focalized in your conscience, once it becomes a conscious thought, it loses its substance and meaning. You can even think about this in the dream state. Like you lose it when upon waking, like you lose the world that you were just in moments prior, and you could try to, you know, recover it, and sometimes you're successful at it. I think it can be done in practice, but that very idea that it's elusive and it's almost vague, like it's not even knowable in the same way that it can, that it, like it remains in silence, like it's tacit, it stays in its tacit form. As soon as it's made explicit, it loses its meaning. Like, I don't know how to explain
No,
it.
that's perfect. That's exactly right. That's like the idea of killing something to dissect it, right? It's the same idea. Like this is why I say you have to, the real is found in the periphery, in a sense, in the shape. But what I thought was really cool in the thing that I read here is he says, moonlight is a symbol of knowledge reflected between the self and nature through imagination, a guiding light beneath which the enchanted nature of matter is more visible. So he drags imagination into it, which is, which is what you were just talking about, like in the dream world, right? We would call that the workings of our imagination, right? Or the periphery. I had this really weird experience one time where I was on this medication, and the doctor gave me, it wasn't illegal. and I had gone up to milk my goats, and I was coming back from the goat barn. I was walking through one of our pastures. It's just a big open field. And I had the milk bucket in my hand, and I was walking watching my feet. Like I don't usually stare straight ahead. So I was walking with my head down, and suddenly I saw a stop sign, right? And I stopped because I thought I was going to walk into it. And then I'm like, oh, that's weird. Why would there even be a stop sign in the middle of my pasture? Right? And then I walked a little further, and then there it was again, and I don't know, I had to go for a doctor's appointment, and the doctor wanted to know how the medication was working. And I said, well, I had this really weird experience where I, walked into a stop sign in the middle of my field. And he said, oh, peripheral hallucinations. That's what that was. Yeah. It was in the periphery.
Yeah.
But it was so real. Like, it was so real that I thought I was going to hit my head, on this signpost, right? I don't know what I was trying to say with that, but he took me off the medication because it was a side effect that was not really desirable. I'm like, I can't do this.
I don't like stop signs.
Not in the middle of my field. And why a stop sign of all things?
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a whole different story. But yeah, the symbol of knowledge reflected between the self and nature. So there's this reciprocal, thing going on between you and nature, which also reflects back to that poem, where he's looking at things and all he can see is man, right? He's looking at rock, bush, river in the face, but it's really, he sees the shape of a human being. So yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Take it away, Luke.
I would prefer to hear what you have to say, but I no, I would distract from because I've got another thought.
No,
But
go for it. Just do it. Unless you want to say something about that. Jason.
well, I think I'm confused about that. In
Oh, are you?
like the reflection of man yeah.
Mm, yeah. Well, that's a
Yeah.
what confuses you about that? I'm curious.
I think it's because I don't want to see myself there.
Okay, that's good.
See yourself in nature, you mean, or what do
Sure. Yeah, because I don't, but that's also has to do with all sorts of like self-loathing and, that sort of thing. So it's like,
Yeah,
if you don't see yourself as beautiful, but you apprehend beauty in nature, then then you have to confront your own beauty and your own, then you have to confront your own magical, truth, beauty, and goodness, and you don't, if you do not want to see that, you'll run from it. And that's exactly what he's talking about in that poem.
Mhm. Do you think that's also a sort of disenchantment?
Yeah, it's depression. I mean, this is exactly what you're talking about. And so it is very much that piece of the puzzle where it's like, well, that was what I had thought of in reading Fantasties and reading about the shadow, was very much that disenchantment and reenchantment theme, but also that's directly related, at least in my own experience, to my depression. And
Right.
what it was that has begun a reenchantment process for me is this Sophianic sort of like very like I I can't look at it directly. I want to see the face of God, but I can't I can't s- I can't look at him dead in the eyes,
Yeah.
and plus I'd burn into 1,000 little smithereens if I did or whatever. But
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
But you wouldn't even recognize them if you did. Like
Right?
the thing,
Exactly.
you wouldn't even know where to look, right? And I had that when I read that poem there from Henry Sutton, that everywhere you look, you see a man. I had that same Calvinist knee-jerk reaction. I was like, no, not that evil thing,
It's
right?
knee deep. It's got its talons.
It does. But I mean, my own experience and all the things that I've been learning, this to me is God hidden in plain sight. You see, like one of the things that I've realized, that the shape of God in the world is the shape of a man, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that calls me into that imaginative process of trying to figure out what that means. I've always thought about the fact that Christ was fully man and fully God. I mean, I've thought about it. I've heard it, and I've let it go. And I've seen the way that humanity has struggled with that concept down through the ages, through the church fathers and so on, right? Like they want to strive against it. And yet it's not something that can be said explicitly, like you were talking about. It can't be made explicit. It just has to be left as it is, fully God and fully human, right? I was in catechism classes recently, and we were talking about the Eucharist. And my priest said, you know, the Eucharist is fully bread and wine and fully blood and body. And I'm like, cling. There it is, right? It's the fully God and fully man concept. Yeah. And we don't know how to process that, you know, because we think linearly, right? So, yeah. well, what came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing? Is it bread or is it God, you know? Mm-hmm. Well, it's both. It's both, right? And you have to live in an enchanted world in order to actually grasp that fully, I think. And this is why, you know, bringing it back to the moon, this is what the moon does. It unveils, right, in the moonlight. It has this silvery white peripheral, not explicit, feminine quality to it that gives you, you know, that shimmering glimpse of what I call the slippery fish.
Slippery.
You go to grab it and it's just gone, yeah. You know?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I like that you guys brought up, I think it was when you said, Luke, that when you try to look at God or something, you might just burst into a bunch of 1,000 pieces. It just reminded me, I said to one of my friends a long time ago, we were just out walking at night one time, and I just looked up and the moon was there, and I made the comment how, like, and I don't even know if it's a true statement, but I was like, you know, the only way I can actually look at the sun is to look at the moon, because I can't go out and just stare at the sun, but I can go out and stare at the moon. And it kind of reminds me of the same thing with Christ and his bride. Like, you know, the only way I can truly know God, at least right here and now, is through communion with his bride, basically, and the other people in his body. So I don't know. I like that connection, but I'm like, I don't know. It seems like a true statement to me, but I'm no scientist, so.
No, I really appreciate you saying that, because I think that is that's a beautiful way of looking at it. And I think that yeah, because what is it? Is it God's holiness? Is that what it is that you know, so often is, you know, you're out walking on holy ground, you know, that's the idea where you are not worthy, and so yeah, but then Christ makes a way. So
well, I have another little quote from a writer on Burma and Burma's relationship to the moon. He does talk about the moon, but not as much as the sun, like the other thing that I read. But he says, the world is the body of universal man. The spiritual sun is his heart, and the moon is the symbol of his imagination. The true meaning of Burma's writings, like those of the Bible, will only be understood if we cease to look upon the cosmos from our limited personal point of view, and by becoming identified in our consciousness with the all, and realize that the all is ourself. And that's very much like moonlight is a symbol of knowledge reflected between the self and nature through imagination. A guiding light beneath the enchanted nature of matter is more visible. Yeah. And then again, back to the poem by Henry Sutton, that wherever he looks, he sees man, right? He sees the shape of man. But the thing is, for me anyway, personally, I've had to realize, and we live in a world that is okay with the complete annihilation of mankind, right, on the earth. Like, seriously, they are. And And yet the scriptures and our intuition tells us that there's something very sacred about mankind and the role that he plays in the world, right? But it's a cosmic role, and I think that that's something that at least I like to highlight. You know, it's not, our salvation often in Christian circles becomes very egocentric. It's all about us, you know, it's all about mankind getting saved, right? From the sinking ship kind of thing. But man is mediating salvation for all of creation.
Yeah.
All of it. And all of creation is telling man about himself and God at the same time, you know?
Yeah, it better be about all creation, because that's where we put our dead even. I mean, we bury the bones back in like the womb of the earth. They go right back in the mother's belly. And where,
right.
Yeah, you don't want to abandon that. I don't know. But I know what you mean. Yeah, it's pretty prominent there.
Yeah.
I had some questions I want to ask you guys, but they would probably go off in a way different area. So we don't have to get there yet. But I was looking for this. It was in Lilith, and I remember it was in chapter 7, and he said all night. It was talking about the dead that are laying in like this graveyard area, but he said all night the moon reads their faces and smiles. And then he says, but why leave them in the corrupting moonlight? I asked. Our moon, he answered, is not like yours, the old cinder of a burnt out world. Her beams embalm the dead, not corrupt them. You observe that here the sexton lays his dead in the earth. He buries very few under it. In your world, he lays huge stones on them as if to keep them down. I watch for the hour to ring the resurrection bell and wake those that are still asleep. So I don't know. He brings up this idea that the moonlight reads their faces and also embalms the dead in that world. I don't know. What do you? Go ahead. What do you think?
I had that highlighted in there too. Well, he says the moon that we have, our moon is, let me just see if I can figure this out. If our moon is not like yours, her beams embalm the dead, not corrupt them. Oh, okay. Okay, so in his world, they embalm the dead and not corrupt them. So they're incorruptible.
Yeah.
Because that's what embalming does, right? It makes, it stops decay.
Yeah. That's good. There was another part in Lilith where I remember he mentioned that there were many moons and many different types of moons. And I've always kind of wondered about that. But then I was actually out thinking today, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I was just thinking that I feel like it's kind of similar in the way we live too. Because like with the sun, if I was going to follow the sun, it's like we already said, it's clear. It's a cut. It's rises in the east, sets in the west. Like I know it's this path that gives me a clear path sort of to follow. But the moon, I mean, maybe I could study it enough to understand it, but I have no idea when she's going to rise, what she's going to look like, if she's going to be full, if she's going to be kind of a yellowish tint, if she'll even be red. And I don't know what arc she's going to take through the sky, when she's going to set. Like this past month, I don't know if it's the same, because I don't even know if she's the same in your area as like where it is for me. But this past month, I mean, it's been like all night long. The moon's been just a really, she like up in the sky all night. And where other nights it'll be like, I'll watch just this little arc and then she'll go down. And so I'm like, I don't know, there just seems to be maybe that idea of many moons, and she's always doing something different, which like makes you even more intrigued and more digging into the imagination or something and trying to discover, I guess. And
you also see by that light too, right? Like I know living here, I'm always happy for a full moon because I don't have to wear a headlamp, and you know, I can just go straight out, do my chores in the dark, but it's light. And then you have, after full moon phase, you have this no moon, and it's just pitch you know, and you're tapping around trying to figure out where you are if you don't have your headlamp going, you know. And after that, I don't like that phase at all, actually. I don't like the no moon phase because it, you know, especially in the wintertime, because I'm usually working in the dark in the winter, right? Because the days are just shorter. And it's not so much in the summer. And then you get that little sliver, you know, and it's like, oh, she's coming back. And it's, you know, I was thinking, because I've been reading and thinking a lot about what Heidegger talks about. Of course, his book is called Being in Time. And I thought, when did we start keeping time? But now that you mention that, Jason, people have been keeping time with the moon probably forever. It's a way of keeping time, don't you think?
Yeah.
It's definitely a way of keeping. I mean, it is an aurora lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Which makes it very finite, right? Earthy, in a sense, too.
Mm-hmm. So I have another question too. Did you say earlier in that thing you were reading, did you say the metal of the sun was silver as well? Or was that just, because I know you said the metal of the moon was quicksilver. But I didn't know if the metal of the sun is it silver or is it gold? I don't know that it really matters that much. I have no idea.
Medieval alchemy, the sun is often related to fire and sulfur, while the moon is related to water and mercury.
Oh, okay. Fire and sulfur.
You know,
yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt, but when you were talking earlier too about the alchemical process, and then there was that relation that was made with depression and the putrefaction and the because the sulfurization was the putrefaction, but then there was another term.
Yeah,
I remember there's this idea like when people were filled were melancholic back, and I don't know, maybe this is medieval or prior to the medieval period, but it was like people were filled with black bile. And that was like immediately what I thought of, but I didn't say anything then. But I wondered if that in relation to the alchemical thing, if that was that sort of the way that death sort of like haunts. I don't know. I'm losing the words for it, but yeah. Just
I see what you're. No, I think I get what you're saying. I think that goes. Sorry, go ahead, Shari.
Well, no, I just wanted to ask, like, the black bile being part of the putrefaction process.
Yeah. Or
Okay.
being yeah, and I'm not even sure necessarily if it was necessarily a bad thing. I mean, there's a telos in the very idea of alchemy. Like we're trying to accomplish something. We're trying to like transform this substance into something else. And so, you know, there's a goal there. But like, in order to accomplish that goal, there is this sort of like this death that has to occur,
right.
The previous substance, in order for the new substance to actually have any sort of substance to be formed out of, you know. So but those base elements sort of like but I don't know if black bile is related to this at all.
Well, he says here, it says the nigredo is part of the process of putrefaction, dissolution. This dissolution, which is, let's call it deconstruction, right? Says trismosin is quote, nothing but a killing of the moist with the dry. In fact, a putrefaction, and consequently turns the matter black. So there you go. That is alchemical. So that's probably why they had the idea, right? That someone who was depressed was full of black bile. That there was a putrefaction happening.
Is that kind of like the caterpillar going into metamorphosis? Could you pull in that imagery there, or am I getting off base here? That similar idea. So it's kind of like a death and
Yeah.
taking it down to
It says that
deconstructing.
this process goes through many different stages that vary according to the alchemist or alchemical tradition, but a process consisting of at least 3 main stages of
Coagulate.
putrefaction, coagulation, and sublimation is usually followed. So yeah, there's a I mean, it's, I don't know if you, I talk about this all the time with Jess. It's the U-shaped journey, right?
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's the
Yeah.
same pattern, of death, of birth, death, and resurrection. Because sublimation is like this higher,
But we don't think of, I guess I've never made this calculation with alchemy. And I know very little about alchemy, but it gives, it's broadening my understanding of what alchemy is, I suppose.
Yeah, mine too, actually. Like I've tried to read Burma, and it's alchemical in nature, right? So it's like a lot of talking about elements and sulfur and, planets and Jupiter. And I'm like, yeah, woo! Like I don't know where to land with it,
Mhm.
But what you just said there was, really kind of brought it home for me too. So it was really good. And,
So
and what did you ask before, Jason?
Well, I just wanted I was asking if it's kind of like the metamorphosis process of the caterpillar, is that putrefaction thing, if that's similar, because I was thinking if it's related to moonlight, because George MacDonald and Lilith as well, like he kind of, I mean, it's like I said, like you can't put your finger on it, so it's not just related to death, but he kind of brings her in with that idea as well, that it's kind of like this, she's there to keep you, embalm you, her light kind of keeps you in this state to, and then she reads your face. It's like the lesser light to guide you through the night, through that, so that inner intuition, that imagination you can engage in those dark places that I guess you're in with that bile. That was my thought, I guess, is if when you're in the cocoon, like I said, and you're in the cave or whatever, you're not going to find the sun there, but you might find a moon or something. You might find a little inward light or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this idea in the quote that you read about embalms the dead, it's like, because he says that, the moon corrupts, right? And he's corrected and says, no, she doesn't corrupt. She makes incorruptible, basically.
Yeah.
Right. And that is what the imagination does. I mean, if you connect the moon to imagination, like it says in here, moonlight is a symbol of knowledge reflected between the self and nature through imagination. Then it's the imagination which makes the thing incorruptible, which makes you literally incorruptible, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the weird thing too with that is like, right, so I think it was 2020, the beginning of that year. I normally try to start up here with like a fast a little bit. I mean, I fast here and there whenever, but like I'll try to do a little bit more extended one. But I remember praying at the beginning of that year that I was kind of felt like I was in one of those places like you mentioned, Luke, where you're just kind of in this dark place in this bile. And I remember praying kind of almost a little bit of a desperate prayer and just like, God, I need you to speak to me through imagination, because there's got to be more. And then after that, like I said, those synchronicities started happening with the moon, and I would lay out on my porch to sleep at night, and it seemed like I was just looking up to a bright moon every single night. Like in my head, it was a full moon, but I'm like, I know that's not true. But so just that weird, there is that connection with the imagination in the moonlight, and that all those ideas run through. And it is that I love that you brought up that it's incorruptible, because it is that, it's like a weird saving grace in those dark times, that moonlight is. Yeah.
The way in which the moon doesn't overpower the darkness is just, I don't know if that's I think we've already talked about it, but it's just that idea that the darkness does not go away, but here is some measure of radiance to like get through.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's good.
and it only illuminates what's closest to you, right? Like you don't get to see the whole landscape. You only get to see a few feet ahead of yourself or whatever. I mean, if you're lucky, if it's a snowy night,
Yeah.
then you might get to see the whole landscape.
That's
But-
really good.
But yeah, you just get to see things kind of one step at a time.
Yeah.
Did
I
you
had a
guys-
question for you guys. I have no thoughts on this, and this is probably gonna derail it maybe somewhere else. But do either of you have any ideas on the Cheshire Cat? Is that how you even say it? Like, what's going on with that whole thing? And the moon and the way its mouth is, and I don't know what's happening there. I mean, I know she's in kind of a dream world, but is it the same idea?
I need to pull up an image so that I know
You can
what-
share screen if you want.
I don't, it's been so long since I read Alice in Wonderland. I love the Cheshire Cat, actually. But I don't know how she fits. Like, I don't even know what her role is in the story, really.
Maybe it's completely unreal. I've never read the book. I just remember the Disney cartoon when I was little, and she'd show up and have like at one point in one scene, I think Alice looks up and she sees the moon, and it's kind of like a half moon or something, where it looks like a smile, and then it turns into the smile of the cat. And I've always,
okay.
I don't know why, it's always stuck out in my head. I'm like, maybe it has nothing to do with the idea of the symbolism of the moon. I have no idea. I just was curious if you guys had any thoughts on that.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
sorry.
the cat being a feline, and why did I know that? Like femininity in the cat and the moon and darkness and the whole thing. I mean, that's
It seems
all
to all
there.
be there, right? Yeah.
Oh, there, yeah, that's true. And in Lilith, there are two cats too. Yeah, but we won't give it too much away because Luke's gonna read it.
Yeah, you got to read it.
I
Yeah.
would-
It's a fun book too. It's just, I mean, you read through it, and I remember the first time reading through, and I was just like, what the heck is going on? And it just feels like a trip. And then the way he does it, he just like takes everything and just pulls it together at the end. And you're like, oh, okay, there it all is. It's fun.
cool. I'm down. I'm kind of very new to even fantasy literature in general, or even I've read some fiction, but a lot of it has not been rooted in any sort of fantasy world. So
Yeah,
like Lord of the Rings and Narnia, but those were like the staples, you know. So
I tried reading At the Back of the North Wind years and years ago with my daughter when she was like 3 or 4. I thought I'd read her a fairy tale. And someone told me to read George MacDonald, that he was a Christian. So I was like, well, okay, then, you know, I'll do that. Just read the Christian stories. And I was like, what is wrong with this man? This is a terrible story. It just felt so strange to me. It's a world that I had never even, this is like, I'm what, 23 or 24 reading this story, and I still have the book. I still have yet to read the story, but now I want to.
I still have yet to read the story. I tried listening to that one, and it is strange. I don't know if I finished it either, but
It's funny because the North Wind has on the dust jacket of the book, she's got this hair that goes right down to the ground, and it's just like everywhere, right? And I went. This is a funny story. I went to the hairdresser, and a friend of mine took my daughter. She was 3, and that's when we were reading the book, and took her while I was at the hairdresser. And then when they came back, and I went, this was in Switzerland, and I went to this Italian, like real Italian guy, he had me practically doing gymnastics in the thing. Like I had to hang my head upside down, Anyways, by the time I was done, I had this Italian hairdo, which is like, poof. And this is like the 80s, And my daughter walks in and she goes, "Mommy, you look like the North Wind."
that's great.
Oh.
Everybody was like, the north wind. Yeah. But I do have to read that one.
Yeah.
So have you read almost basically all his stuff, Sherry? No,
No.
you haven't. Okay.
I still
haven't either.
I haven't finished the Golden Key yet. I got halfway through it and then distracted as usual. And then and I read The Light Princess. And I want to read The Day Boy and the Night Girl. Is it The Night Boy and the Day Girl? Or
Yeah, read that one. That's a lot what we're talking about with the sun and the moon. Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
thinking there must be a lot of moon imagery in that one too.
Yeah,
Right.
you can actually find that. I'm pretty sure it's on Apple Podcasts if you wanted to listen to it instead,
Yeah.
or something. It might be on Spotify as well, but I read it because I had those little books, like you said, you had a copy as well. Yeah, it was in one of those, and I remember reading it, and it was,
Yeah.
it was good. It definitely he was pulling on those ideas a lot.
And I read Lilith first on Luke Thompson's recommendation, and then I got Fantasties, and that I listened to it on an audiobook while I was turning my compost, and I could hardly wait to go turn my compost so I can continue listening to Fantasties.
So what's your favorite?
My
Do you have-
favorite?
Yeah.
Well, I love Fantasties because it's so rich. It's like a tapestry to me.
Yeah.
You know, of stories within stories within stories, and the descriptive language is super rich. Lilith is very profound. It's kind of biblical in a sense.
Yeah.
Fantasties is, if you spend too much time thinking about it, you'll miss the whole magic of the story.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
you just have to immerse yourself.
That's my main concern about, we're doing a read through with a few friends of mine, and we're going through Fantasties, and that's one of my main concerns. I'm like, man, we can't pick this book apart too much because it's
That's
just,
what Luke and I said too when we first got together to talk. We were
Yeah.
thinking about going, talking about Fantasties, and we both agreed that, yeah,
No,
Yeah.
I even though I really did appreciate Jason, the commentary, I think I just started it earlier today that you had with a couple of other guys that were. Yeah. Anyways, it was you guys approached it in a pretty cool way.
thanks.
Does anybody have a favorite part of Fantasties that we could share? You don't have to read it. Like, you could, if you can remember it.
Yeah, I think my favorite part was when he goes to the because we've all read the whole book, right? So I don't want to
Yeah.
spoil it. Okay, yeah. So if anyone's listening, I'll spoil it, but I might spoil something. But my favorite part was when he finds the mother or grandmother or whatever spinning in the cottage, and he goes into the house of the dead. Basically, I can't remember what the door is. He goes through that door, and just that whole scene, it's just amazing. And she tells him like not to go into this one door, and he's just like, but I was gone. And then he said, I don't remember anything. He wakes up, there's a flood, but it's the one door he goes through in particular, I like a lot, where there's this quote, and he says, the dead kiss well, I will not be afraid, or something like that. And then he says, the veil between, though very dark, is very thin, something like that. I don't know, it's that whole little scene in there where he's in there with the dead, and he's just, I don't know, that really stood out to me a lot.
I'm gonna have to reread that.
Yeah.
I remember he came out with a shadow from that experience, right?
No, that was an earlier door where he meets the goodness, what, the ogre. Yeah.
Oh,
And there's it's later on in the book. When is it? It might be after he gets rid of his shadow. I'm not sure, or it might be before that. I don't know. But he finds this house, and there's just this old lady spinning, and he
Right.
ends up like weeping with her, and goes through I think 4 doors. And I think the first one he has like a memory of him and his brothers, and one of his brothers dying or something like that. I don't know. I don't remember exactly.
Well, it might be 1 year to the day that I read or listened to Fantasties, so maybe it's time for another.
Are we all? So you hadn't read a whole lot before recently, then? of George MacDonald, or did you grow up reading him? Like,
Who, me?
yeah,
Or Luke?
or well,
Oh,
either one of
oh.
you.
No, he was, I'd never heard of him before. Never heard of him. And when I got the book at the back of the North Wind, I was in Switzerland, and
Mhm.
someone said, "Oh, you should really read George MacDonald. If it wasn't for George MacDonald, we would never have had Tolkien and Lewis." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And then I tried reading in the back of the North Wind, and I was like, "This man is crazy."
Yes, yeah.
What's wrong with him?
So what's your do you have a favorite parts of Phantastes?
Yeah, I think my favorite is when he is finally having the realization that, like, this, when he's approaching the palace and he's in his boat. At the end of the book, I'm thinking of the right thing, right?
I think, yeah, he floats down some stream, if I remember right, and then he comes upon this palace, and there's like a library in the palace as well, or something, and a pool.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was the realization that, like, that this was his, you know.
Mhm.
It wasn't,
Yeah.
it wasn't even it. And I don't know exactly how he came to that realization, but it was like he realized that this belonged to him, and that this had been his all along. And that, like, because it kind of, I guess what that meant was like this was his inheritance. Like,
Yeah.
this was his, I guess I don't know if it would be his mother's inheritance or his father's inheritance. I don't know if it was necessarily linked to the secretary and the gift of the secretary, coming to him, but it was it was kind of like he he is a child of, you know, I don't know how to explain it, but it was a very, like, oh, the realization that you're a child of God type of thing, and that, like, this is your inheritance, and it was
cool.
like, yeah. So
That's really cool. Those are all thoughts I had that hadn't even gone through my head before. That's really good, man. I don't know why I didn't connect any of that. That's really good.
yeah.
That's good. What about you, Sherry? What's your favorite?
My favorite part is when he runs across the little girl. Oh, in the night, I can't remember his name now. There's a knight, and he runs across this little girl who's collecting butterfly wings, and she's dressed in rags. Let's call them filthy rags. and he can see little bumps on her shoulder, on her back, where her shoulder blades are. And she goes to the butterflies, and she asks for their wings, and they give them to her. And then she's making a patchwork of her own wings with the wings from the butterflies. And these wooden men who are invisible are attacking her. And the way George MacDonald puts it, he says they knock her down and walk all over her. And I'm just like, I get that. You know, you're trying to collect these butterfly wings, right? You're asking these butterflies for their wings, and they're so beautiful, and you're making your own wings with these butterfly wings, and these invisible men are knocking you down and walking all over you, right? And you're just a poor little girl dressed in filthy rags. And I think the last line in that little story is, it says, so he hits them with his sword, and when he hits them with his sword, they appear, and they're wooden. And so he tries hacking them, and all the splinters become more of them. Which is just so perfect. and then he finally figures out that he has to flip them upside down and stand them on their heads. I just I'm like, George, you're doing this so well. Keep going, And so then he says, I tripped one of them up and taking him by the legs, set him on his head and with his heels against a tree. I was delighted to find he could not move. Meantime, the poor child was walked over by the other, but it was for the last time. Whenever one appeared, I followed the same plan, tripped him up and set him on his head. And then the last line, and so the little beggar, was able to gather her wings without any trouble.
That's great.
And I just thought, man,
Yeah, that book is a masterpiece. It is
an incredible story in there.
Wow.
That is my favorite. That one and the little boy where the shadow passes over him, But that one there is just like the description. I was just roaring when I was reading it. I was just roaring when, these wooden guys, they're just wooden.
I love how much you love it.
I love it so much. And if you hit them with your sword and splinter them, they make more. Oh, sorry. I just find it very amusing.
Yeah, it's weird. It's very like it's weird. You have to kind of approach it with that moonlight in a way, with that intuition, with that imagination, and then it makes sense. And you're like, wow, this is extremely real, and I can, it's relatable on a lot of levels, and it's But if you try to think about it and make too much sense of it, then you lose the whole thing.
I think there's a really beautiful line in here about let me see if I can find it. Maybe it's not. Maybe I just think it is. Yeah, I don't know. I can relate to the little girl collecting the butterfly wings. He says after walking for 2 or 3 hours. Oh no, here, wait, here it is. Oh, this is so beautiful. I have to read it. So I armed myself to be ready for anything that might happen and followed the child. For though I could make nothing of her story, I could see she was a little human being in need of some help or other. As she walked before me, I looked attentively at her. Whether or not it was from being so often knocked down and walked over, I could not tell. But her clothes were very much torn, and in several places her white skin was peeping through. I thought she was humpbacked, but on looking more closely, I saw through the tatters of her frock, do not laugh at me, a bunch of each shoulder, of the most gorgeous colors. Looking yet more closely, I saw that they were of the shape of folded wings, and were made of all kinds of butterfly wings and moth wings, crowded together like the feathers on the individual butterfly pinion, but like them, most beautifully arranged, and producing a perfect harmony of color and shade. I could now more easily believe the rest of her story, especially as I saw every now and then a certain heaving motion in the wings, as if they longed to be uplifted and outspread. But beneath her scanty garments, complete wings could not be concealed, and indeed from her own story, they were yet unfinished. It just brings tears to my eyes, when he says, I saw every now and then a certain heaving motion in the wings as if they longed to be uplifted and outspread. Just like, And then these wooden guys come along, knock her down and walk all over her.
Yeah.
Such a good story. And of course, Cosmos, the story of Cosmos in Fantastic. The story within the story, right?
Yeah.
Is amazing. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't mind talking about Fantasties like this.
Yeah.
This is beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, almost one of the best ways to talk about it, I think, is reading it like you do, and just soak it in.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I always thought that the standing the guys on their heads. I thought about that for a long time. Why does he stand them on their heads? I think it's because, and they can't move, right? Because they're looking at everything upside down. Like their whole world is turned upside down. That's what he does to them.
Yeah.
And what happens? They can't move. They're stuck. They've never seen it like that before.
Mm-hmm. Paralyzed.
Yeah.
Wow. I just read that part in Acts today in the Bible where it's talking about they go to Thessalonica and the people get all mad at them because they're preaching the gospel there, and they say it says that, I can't remember what verse, like I don't know the specific reference, but he says basically these people have come here and they're turning the world upside down. It's kind of that's what my translation says, at least. Yeah, they're turning the world upside down.
Yeah.
Shaking things up.
Yeah. I would hate it if anybody ever got a hold of Fantasies and tried to turn it into a movie. They would probably destroy it. It would be the worst thing ever. I'm like, man. Hopefully whoever reads that book would be smart enough to never attempt that, because it's like that article you sent me, Sherry, about the imagination. That was probably one of the hardest things I've ever read in my entire life, but it was so worth it because there's just like little pieces that I gleaned throughout the whole thing. But it kind of feels like that, where he talks about kind of like what we were talking about with the whole moonlight and sunlight thing. Like once we take something and it's conscious, we just keep masking it into this clay. We're like, okay, I've got it in my hand and I can, and it takes the poetry out of it. It takes the imagination out of it. I think the same thing would happen with that book if people just start dissecting it too much or make it into a film or something like that. It's like, no, it seems the purpose of it is to pull your imagination. And like C.S. Lewis said, baptize it.
Yeah. Well, like it's like my version of the movie. I'm laughing my head off when I read that part about the little girl with butterfly wings. I don't know if everybody else would, but I'm just roaring. I'm just like, oh, George, you're so cunning and you're so good.
I gotta go back and read it.
Oh yeah. I think I'll do that too. Another reading of Fantasties. Like I said, it's one of those books that'll be like a pilgrimage, right?
Yeah. I think like having a decent book cover is as far as you can go, because I got some copy that has like these beautiful images on the front, or it was a used copy, and it is. You have it right there, don't you?
I'm trying to pull it. Is it that
That's
one?
the one. Yeah. I was like, yeah, that's as far as you can go. And maybe that's too far. No movies.
Yeah. Making images. This is Lilith. So
Oh, that is
kind of similar. Yeah.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah, it looks almost identical.
Yeah. I don't know who did the artwork on these.
Isn't that, I've got, let me see, I've got a, where's mine? I don't know if I can find it
I know.
quickly or not.
Do you keep your books in order? I don't.
No, I just have this little this copy of Fantasies with me. I just carry it in my book bag all the time. Lilith I don't normally have with me, but I just, for this conversation, I had it earlier.
Yeah.
With it, but
that was smart. That was thinking ahead.
Yeah, I actually have another copy of Fantasies where it actually includes artwork, and I don't know who did it, but I've never read it yet. Yeah, I don't know. I'll go grab it real quick and just see. It's sure, it should be right here.
That's so cool.
No, I don't know where I have my copy because I end up stacking books up everywhere. Let me see here.
Yeah.
I have a newer one.
Accumulating, don't they?
I read a book years ago. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you. So it's not like a lot of artwork, but there's like different things in there, and I'm like, I don't really like it. I don't know. I mean,
is that original though? Because he did have artwork to the book.
I don't know. Oh, maybe he did. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what this is.
Wait, George was an illustrator as well?
No, but somebody did it for him.
Okay.
I don't know. I'll have to read more on this one. I found this I go to this used bookstore McKay's. I don't know if you guys have them there, but every time I see a George MacDonald book, I'm like, I'm taking it. Even if I already have a copy, I'm like, I'll give it to someone. I don't care. I'm taking it. So I probably bought like 5 copies of Fantasties by now, and I've given them away. And yeah, so
That's
Nice.
so cool. I love that.
Yeah, that's great.
You know, it's made an impact on you when you just like keep on giving it up.
yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
It is. Yeah.
The moon is made of cheese.
Yeah, I was actually that popped up in my head earlier today too, because I was writing, I was trying to write something, and so it was about. I still have no idea what to do with what I'm writing, but it was about this little girl character I've been thinking of, and she follows these. It was kind of along that idea of her following this weird light in the darkness, but I went through a list of things, and I don't even know how much they're all related. One was like she was following this trail of silver coins that and I was trying to use like sound as well, and so they were ringing as if they were just flipped off some Lazarus the angel's fingers or something like that. So that was kind of one thing, and then the next one was like there these silvery clams that would open up and reveal pearls that were like singing or something like that. And then the one after that was milky moons, these little milky moons. And then I was thinking about it, and I was like, oh, and then there comes this part where she gets scared, and then the milky moons turn sour, and I was like, it just feel like some moldy blue cheese or something. Like, I don't know.
Exactly.
Because the woods just kind of become horrifying at one point or whatever. But then another part I put in there was the will o' the wisp, and I was wondering if that's similar to following the moonlight. I'm not too. Are either of you familiar with those ideas? Okay, I think it's like a will o' the wisp. I know it was in that Disney movie Brave, and it's this little when she's younger, she sees these. The way they show it on that is these glowing orbs leading on a trail through the woods in the middle of the night. And the most I'm familiar about is it seems to be kind of along those lines. It's like this little guiding orbs or something you find in the woods. I don't know.
And those are will o' the wisps?
Will o' the wisp. It's like W.
Yeah, I know the term will o' the wisps.
Will o' the wisp. Let's see. Wikipedia. In folklore, will o' the wisp, or giddy flame. It's got different ones. Is an atmospheric ghost light seen by travelers at night, especially over bogs, swamps, and marshes.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The things I don't know that. Why do we tell ghost stories around campfires at night? And then there's these weird things. I remember going out on a full moon trying to find the Michigan Dog Man. Like,
what is this? I got to hear about this. Michigan Dog Man. What's going on?
Yeah, well, it's like the Wendigo or whatever. Like,
okay.
every state has one, And so
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't heard of one here. I'm gonna have to go find one on a full moon or something.
But there was a night in which, then this is high school, and so you go out with your friends, and we wanted to find the Dog Man, and we had heard about a place where somebody had saw one, so we went to the exact location, and I didn't see anything, but 3 of my friends were petrified, like turning white, swore they saw something, white as a ghost, like, and still swear to it to this day that they all 3 saw the Michigan Dog Man that night, under the full moon. But like, there's I think it's just you can get yourself into there's something about like the imagination that does change in under the lesser light, I suppose. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Did I ever send you that imagination essay, Luke?
It doesn't sound familiar, but as soon as you saw it,
but he makes a distinction between, I don't know if it's in that one or the other one. There's another one he wrote about the imagination where he makes a distinction between fancy and imagination.
Yeah, I remember you, or at least I remember in the meditations and the conversation that
Yeah.
came up.
Yeah,
Which
because I wondered if Michael Martin knew more about that, because it was an idea that Coleridge came up with.
okay.
But MacDonald kind of carries it along with a more theological approach, of course, right?
Hmm.
But he says that you should discourage your children from fancy and direct them towards imagination, because imagination is divine, whereas fancy is not, right? And I don't know, when you were telling that story, I was wondering how much of that is fancy and how much of it is imagination, right?
Yeah. I mean, or in the same way, I was thinking back to the conversation that we had, because it's like there's very much this fantasy that I could opt into as a young person because of was it imagination or was it fancy? To pretend that I was an animal, you know, and could participate in the life of, or the spirit of that animal, you
Oh,
know.
actually, I think that is imagination.
And maybe
Personally.
that is, but I was
Yes.
sitting there trying to think about what is that, you know, and what's the difference.
I think that is childlikeness that George MacDonald so often talks about in his unspoken sermons.
Okay.
Because that is like a full participation in being itself, right? Like you are whatever. Like I've always explained it as, for a child, he is the tree, he is the water, he is the butterfly, he is the superhero, right? Or she. And when they build something, a little fort in the woods, it is the fortress and it is the castle, and I am the princess, and right, there's a full participation in being.
Yeah.
That's what that is. And that to me is divine imagination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think my computer's gonna shut off. I'm gonna grab my charger.
Can you say more about that a little bit? Then what are they engaging in? So like pretending to be so I guess so you just mean like how little children play and they'll
Well,
pretend to be animals.
that is enchantment, right? Like that
Mm.
is the child in Phantastes who the shadow has not yet fallen across,
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Of materialism, of reductionism, of, there's nothing to stop that child from being exactly whatever it is he thinks he is, he's magic, right? He can do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think Luke and I talked about that last time we talked, was how important it is to not let that child die. Like George MacDonald starts out his unspoken sermons with a child in the mist, right? That's the very first, I think that's the very first sermon, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, because the next one is the consuming fire, I think, or
Right.
something like that.
Yeah. And
I'm only
so
2 chapters in, so
yeah, and I think what's important to note about that, because apparently he wrote them in a specific order, right? He's taking you on a journey, and he starts you there with childlikeness, because Jesus said, and that's the verse he uses, that you have to become like a little child, right?
Mhm.
And I think that like in that sermon, he has, let me see if I can find the quote, because it's also really, really beautiful. Hang on a second. He talks about how a child loves.
Mm.
Yeah. Oops. I know the key word here. Looking for it on my Kindle. Yeah, here it is. For when is the child the ideal child in our eyes and to our hearts? Is it not when with gentle hand he takes his father by the beard and turns that father's face up to his brothers and sisters to kiss? When even the lovely selfishness of love seeking has vanished and the heart is absorbed in loving. In this then is God like the child, that he is simply and altogether our friend, our father, our more than friend, father and mother, our infinite love, perfect God. That because what he ends up doing in that sermon is he doesn't just say that you have to become the child, but you have to become the child because God is the child.
Yeah.
And that's George's version of the simplicity of God, right? Of the singleness of God. And that's why I say that a child in that mode of imagination is participating in being itself.
Mhm. Then I guess I am still curious what would distinguish imagination from fancy, or what would be a good example of fancy.
Can I ask a question on top of that one that might be kind of related? Because when the question earlier was kind of engagement in the with playing and even pretending to be like animals, there would be I think a distinction between how children will run around, pretend they're dogs and like have a dog house and everything, and then someone pretending to be a werewolf or something. Seems like one would be not good and the other would be. Is one fancy?
I don't think it has to do with that. I don't think it has to do with good or bad. I think what it is that like in his other imagination, I think it's the other one, imagination essay, he talks about writing fairy tales and how there is a law, and the law says that you can't call good bad and you can't call bad good, for example. And so when you break the law in the fairy tale, you break the fairy tale. It's no longer a proper story, right? And so my best example for fancy is all the Jackass stuff. Remember Jackass?
Mhm. I was just thinking of something similar, like the Saw movies. Like, I don't know,
What movies?
the Saw movies. Like,
Oh, okay.
I don't
Yeah.
know, like,
I never saw those, but I just remember when Jackass came out and my teenage son was watching it, and I remember looking at it going, I'm sorry, but right? Like you're I don't know, it's walking on the edge of something. Like it's imaginative because they're putting themselves in these really imaginative situations, but they're not for anything of any value. Like I don't even want to say that they were bad, but whatever it was that they did, it had no, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because I'm thinking about even like some fantasy, or even like, I think Game of Thrones captivated the nation or what have you, but there's a lot of that, like there's so much filth in it as well that was like, could have done without it, and maybe would have maybe would have kept me entertained even more. I don't know. There's stuff like that where I'm like, maybe that's, but that's also me exercising judgment too. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was sorry, at the part where you're mentioning like not calling something good and calling something bad. when you, because I remember listening to your conversation with Luke Thompson, right? And
Yeah,
I
Jess.
think he was in there. Yeah, and Jess. Yeah, I haven't met Jess yet, but and I remember talking to my friend Mitch about it later, and we talked a little bit. And then I was just thinking, and I remember thinking about trying to remember if Jesus ever actually did that. And for some reason, the passage that came to my head was like, even with Lazarus, when Lazarus died, um, he doesn't really make a judgment call. He doesn't say this is good or bad. It just says that he wept. And I was like, maybe that's the proper way to approach things. It's just,
Mhm.
I don't
I've
know
said-
what, I
said
don't know
that
whether
today.
they're, what?
I said that's it. I said that exact same thing. Like Jesus never defended anything. He never justified. He never, like when he stood before Pilate, he had every right to defend himself as an innocent man, right? And he chose not to. He chose to remain silent. In the places where he wasn't silent, he often, I think, weeps, right?
Yeah. Because like I might have the capability to recognize something as being sad, extremely sad. But if I don't see the whole story, I can't necessarily say this is evil. So like Lazarus dying, it wasn't an evil that he died, but it still was sad. I mean, there was sorrow there, I think. So I don't know. But I don't know if that would pull that I don't know if the jackass thing would fall into there. Or you could look and be like, oh, this is sad.
I don't know. I mean, I never spent a lot of time watching Jackass. I saw a few things my son would show me when he was a teenager, when it first started, and I thought, these guys, why is this so entertaining? Because it wasn't doing anything. It wasn't.
I think it appeals to the appetitive side of like human desire. I think like
There you go.
the contrary to like something that like it almost like a fleeting pleasure that like does not satisfy for very long,
Right.
leaves you wanting more,
Yeah.
that sort of thing, versus like the kind of like full satisfaction that comes from like I don't even know, resolution or what have you. I don't know. But like desire that doesn't have any lack or whatever,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no further up and further in Jackass, right?
It should go in your quote book.
I saw that episode.
I don't know. I was always baffled, and my instinct, my instinct was my my instinct was I didn't want my son watching it. And it wasn't because I thought it was vulgar or anything like that. It was because it was stupid and useless. And that to me is fancy,
Yeah. I'm really trying to think if there is a utility for it. Because that seems that's the very intent of it, even with the title, is just to be
nothing. It's nothing.
It's the stupidity of it,
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think if there's utility to that, if there's still kind of
Is there? I mean,
I don't know.
Maybe I should have watched more of it. Maybe I could have derived something philosophical from
No,
it.
yeah, I don't know.
I don't.
Yeah, probably not.
Man.
Boys will be boys.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's definitely a boys thing.
We'll blow
Yeah,
stuff up.
maybe my response was more of a girl thing, where I was just like,
Yeah, it's just the desire to blow up your friends. I feel like there's something there.
yeah.
I don't know what it is.
But I sense it. Yeah. Yeah, it's the same thing that makes like, why do you want to stick your friend's hand in a cup of water while he's sleeping to make him wet the bed? It's like, but you want to. but at the same time, it's cruel.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not nice at all, but it's still kind of funny.
There might be a further up and a further in. We just need to pursue it.
Dude,
What's the tell-us of Jackass? Bedwetting.
this is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's something I could never engage in, actually. So maybe my personality, like I just couldn't be cruel to anything.
Yeah.
I couldn't engage in cruelty, at all. I remember visiting my grandmother and walking down the road. There's a bunch of boys and they were catching bullfrogs and smashing their heads against rocks, just one after the other. And it was traumatized me.
Yeah.
Literally traumatized me. It wasn't the blood or the guts, it was the absolute cruelty
Mhm.
and the thrill that they were getting out of doing this,
Yeah.
Yeah. Brutal.
Yeah, that's right.
But then at the same time, you can participate in a violent act because in a mercy, like for instance, my cat catches dead birds, or catches birds and torches them until they're near death all the time. And she did that just the other day. And I've become accustomed to having to put these small sparrows, nuthatches, whatever. And
Oh, nuthatches.
yeah, she got a nuthatch the other day. And it was just like, this is in a weird way, I was actually able to hold this bird that I've been looking at for months on end in the palm of my hand and study it, but it was like, at the same time it needed to, I'm putting this animal out of its misery.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so
yeah.
that whole side of it where, yeah, the life of, I don't know.
I know. I had a cat.
Not cruel though.
Yeah, but that's not cruel. That's a mercy.
Yeah.
I remember stepping out the front door one day and I saw this half-eaten chipmunk or squirrel laying at the door, and I was like, oh, and then it blinked and I was like, no, it's alive. The whole back end of it was eaten. And I had to take a 2x4, and it was brutal.
That's the quickest way though, and it seems like literally almost the worst way to go out in the most immediate way. I'm not going to torture this bird any more than it needs to be tortured. So I'm going to do the 2x4, what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Make it quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we want to end on that note? I mean, I feel like we should wrap this back into something else.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, we can end it.
Is the moon out in Tennessee? Also, didn't we just have a blood moon?
Yeah.
Oh, there goes my dog. Ember, chill.
So did you guys have a blood moon? I didn't see a blood moon, but I saw someone post one in a Discord.
It was just a full moon or lunar eclipse.
It was a lunar eclipse, but we didn't see it because it was super cloudy here. So it was like nothing happened at all.
Yeah, I don't know if the moon's out right now. I'm outside. I can go.
You probably
look.
don't have a moon tonight, right? If you had a full moon well, I mean, sometimes it depends on the cycle, but sometimes if there's no moon right away, and sometimes there's a moon for a couple of days after a full moon, but it just comes a bit later.
Oh my goodness, I don't see a moon. I never knew it goes to a new moon right after a full moon?
Sometimes it does. And then you have these pitch dark nights, and I hate those nights.
I don't see her at all. That's so weird. I didn't know it did that, or she did that.
Yeah, it'll come up later though, and it'll be full still. It's just later.
Tricky moon. What's she doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was.
Funny that she's feminine, but we say there's a man in the moon, right?
What is that?
Little Boy Blue.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, you can see it. You can see the face, right? Those craters, and people call that the man on the moon or the man in the moon. But
Ah,
And what about the cow that jumped over it?
I don't know. Say more about
know.
that. What does that mean? Is that
Oh,
because it's cheese?
the cow jumped over the moon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard the rhyme, but I have no idea why that's a thing.
Neither do I.
I actually wrote a poem about a moon.
Let's hear it.
You just reminded me of it. You want me to read it?
Yeah, that'd be
Yes.
great.
It's actually kind of a rhymey one, so it's fun. Upon rising this evening, I went to my window. Oh, what my eyes did see. Darkening slowly, the clouds slithered by, the pines whispering secrets to me. I looked past a branch where a little bird sat. I looked past barns and poplar tree. Over the hill yawns the great abyss. I feel something beckoning me. A raven sits carelessly pruning his plume. His eyes wander aimlessly round. Startled, he suddenly takes into flight. Now circling shadows surround. I hear his great wings as he passes me by. I hear them inside of my room, his throaty cry in the dimming light on the eve of the fullest moon. His cackling laughter is filling the night. It rumbles the stars in my sky. Everything falls like the tear on my cheek, all of me questioning why. Away, be gone, you devious bird, shaking my fist to the sky. Only a moment ago I was glad. Now for a moment I die. Given a soul, given a life. Now it's a pound of flesh. Thinking at last I have built it, finding I've only regressed. So now I join with the raven in a plaintive cry to the moon. I'll fly away with this bird as the dish ran away with the spoon.
That's really good.
I loved that.
Yeah.
I
That's
want to
great.
read that again. That would be awesome if you could send that along too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll send you that. Yeah. I wrote that poem, a little personal information, when I found out that I was pregnant for my daughter at the age of 19. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That was fun news.
Yeah.
Fun news.
But it was actually the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah.
Go figure, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of dog do you have, Luke? Is it a boy or girl?
It's a girl, and I believe she is we did one of the Jeff Bezos Amazon dog blood sample. So, whatever they have determined via the Amazon
DNA test.
DNA test. What am I trying to say here?
I
But
thought Bezos came to your house and
yeah,
your dog and
yeah, extracted some blood, but she's a beagle and black lab and Staffordshire Terrier,
oh wow.
Whippet, and supposedly
She sounds schizophrenic.
yeah. Oh, and she's very psycho. And we live in an urban environment, and so like people walk up and down the sidewalk. It's no problem even at midnight. 12 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
10 feet away, walking past my house, and she'll light up every single time, and just scare the living daylights out of people. But she's a good alarm to have.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Well, we should do a Lilith round if you read Lilith.
Yeah. I'll get on it. Maybe I'll listen to it. That seems to be maybe more accessible, and so we'll we'll try that. But I know I'll be missing out on actually reading it aloud.
Oh, that's how I got Fantasties in,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I can't sit there and read a book. It's impossible. I have to go
Just-
do something.
It's very difficult for me too.
Mhm.
So, and just finding time. It's just tough.
I wish I could, like I remember the days where I just laid in my bed and hunkered down and read a book,
Same.
but those days are
Yeah.
long gone.
Yeah, my favorite was to read to myself aloud and just to have the auditory and the, articulation that's I can retain that sort of information. So the books that I've read in that manner are the books that have stuck with me in a more deeper.
I actually have Fantasties on Audible. I have it on my Kindle and I have a hard copy. And I often will read along while I listen.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And I used to read aloud. And I do read aloud
Yeah.
to myself for that same reason. And I loved reading to my kids. I loved it.
Yeah.
Like I could hardly wait till bedtime.
There's only like 3 words on the pages I'm currently reading to my.
Oh,
Once we get into some bigger books, it'll be.
But my kids, well, my son in particular, he ran with it, and he was like, he didn't want me reading to him anymore. He was reading books like they were potato chips, done, and he started young. I think he read all of the Lord of the Rings when he was 12, like just turned 12. I remember he brought them back to us. Well, we were living in Telegraph Creek then, and we had lots of books, and I had these like books for that age. Like he was like 9 to 11 or 9 to 12 when we lived there, 9 to 11. So he wasn't quite 12. And anyway, he had read all his books and all the books of his friends. And, he goes, I don't have anything left to read, and so I said, well, I've got one here, but I don't think you're going to get it. And I handed him Lord of the Rings. And 2 weeks later, so he used to read these kids' books like within a day, but 2 weeks later, he came back and he said, I'm done. And my husband and I were like, no way, you're not done that. And he's like, no, I'm done. We're like, okay, wait, sit down. And we quizzed him, We're quizzing him. And he's getting all the answers right. We're like, okay, well, here's the second one. 2 weeks later, I'm done. And the third one, 2 weeks later. And he brought me the third one back because I said, this is the last one. And he handed it to me and he was really sad. He goes, I'm sad, Mom. And I said, why? And he said, because I'll never be able to read another book again. Nothing will be better than these books. That's what he said. I felt sorry for him.
I know that
I've
feeling.
done this to him at that young age.
Yeah.
Should have waited,
Though that may
Wow.
not be true, I know the feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was devastated because he just read the best books ever and nothing would compare to it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah.
So do you like I never read as a child. The only thing I ever read was Calvin and Hobbes till like a few years ago. So I've never actually read I've only seen the movies of Lord of the Rings and
Oh man, you
the
have to read the book.
Narnia books. Are they better? Do you like them better than George MacDonald, or are they just kind of different category or something?
Well, I the Lord of the Rings, I mean, the thing is, when you've seen the movies, it's almost ruins the books.
Oh no.
But you might be able to just do it, just read the books. But the books are amazing. I went to see the movies and it's kind of like Fantasties, like you don't want that made into a movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That makes
There's
sense.
a puppy. Oh, she's
Are you shy?
What's her name?
yeah.
Ember.
Ember. She's really shiny.
Yeah, she is. And short hair. maybe she's greasy. Who knows?
No, she's beautiful.
Yeah, she's a good dog.
How old is she?
Year and a half.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Still
yeah,
puppy.
still very much puppy. This is my
Yeah.
first dog too.
Did you have her as a puppy? Got her when she was little, or?
Yeah. I think she was only like 8 weeks old or
Oh
so.
wow.
We got her.
Wow.
And then, yeah, it was my first dog. My sister was allergic to all furry creatures growing up, so I
Oh.
always had I had a room full of terrariums and stuff, and like lots of lizards and snakes and stuff like that. But no,
No furry things.
no furry things until this dog came. Well, I had a couple cats in college, and then
Yeah.
cats. I didn't think I would ever be a dog person, but
Oh,
Wow, they're the
Yeah.
best. I
they're
think
the
my
best.
my dog. I've said this multiple times before, but I think my dog taught me more about following God than any Christian I've ever met. It's really sad.
You know,
but
I haven't finished reading it yet, but I did start it. Of all people, David Bentley Hart. Look at her. David Bentley Hart wrote a book called Roland in Moonlight, and have you read it, Luke?
no, I've heard the title though.
Oh, I started it and yeah, I need to finish it. But it's his dog is this like philosophical theologian, talking to him about things. That's the whole
Yeah.
story.
yeah, they'll do that.
And
It's
his
weird.
dog is real. It's his real dog. Like he has a dog named Roland, right? And his real dog's picture is on the front of the book. Yeah. If you love dogs, you should read Roland in Moonlight.
All right,
Sure.
put it on the
That's
list.
cool.
Put it on the list. Yeah.
2 weeks. You got to get back to her.
Gotta read Lilith in 2 weeks as
Yeah.
I
well.
haven't even read it myself. I have to finish it too.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm
Well-
gonna sign off,
I
but
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll probably do the same. Time to go to
Thank-
bed.
Thank you guys so much for this, by the way, for including me on this. This is a lot of fun.
yeah, it was great. No, you're the one who brought us into this. I knew it'd be fun. I knew it'd be great.
Yeah.
Very, very enjoyable.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Let's do it again soon, whenever you guys want. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
you have a good night.
You
Yeah.
too.
You too. Bye, guys.
Bye.